All down. All silent. Going. Go. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me is Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, hello.
G'day, Kieran. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Peter, and certainly welcome back for another week. There's a lot to talk about tonight, but I really wanted to start off this episode by just tackling one of the topics that we get asked about as agents and that we have in many ways touched on briefly, but I really want to chat about agent selection for people looking to sell their home. I know that when I've thought about home sales or when, even prior to getting into the industry, my considerations were things like which agent will get me the best price and which agent is the cheapest because, logically that seems like the things to ask. You're a man with a lot of experience. Are they the right questions to ask? And if they're not, what's a better angle and what are some better choices that I could make as a potential seller to make sure I get the best deal for me?
They're questions that need to be asked here, and how much do you think our home is worth and what are you going to charge us in the process? Who wears the risk of the campaign is also another telling question that needs to be posed there to the real estate agent. We always suggest to people that they should look at selecting their real estate agent on process, not price. It's very tempted to get lured in by the agent that quotes the highest price. Sometimes the agent that does quote the highest price delivers on that price too. So it's not to say that the agent who does quote the highest price has actually got it incorrect, but whoever and whatever a real estate agent says your property's worth, it needs to be backed by evidence that will make sense to the prospective purchasers. At the end of the day, the realtor does not really control the price. The process, more often than not, will deliver the price for the vendor, and we always encourage vendors to scrutinize the sales process because that's where success will be won or lost.
So you've talked about a couple of things there. One, I guess my takeaway from that is that we all love to be told what we like to hear. We love being told that we look great or that we're looking radiant or we don't look tired for the first time in God knows how long.
Your children are well behaved.
My children, yeah, that's a lie.
You look like you've lost weight, Kieran.
Thank you, Peter. Gosh.
Your house is worth $4 million, Kieran.
You can come back next week, Peter. So that's one element is agents will buy the listing, and we've talked about that premise before of overinflating a price to get the listing. So tell me though, what exactly do you mean by the process is important? Are we talking about just auction versus private treaty, or are we talking about something more involved? And if it is something more involved, then how do we as a seller actually go about ensuring that the process is front of mind in this? Are there questions we need to ask? Is there a line of inquiry or things we need to know or obtain from the agent that can tell us whether or not their process is the one for us?
Yeah, I think there is. If you were granted the listing for our home, Mr. or Mrs. Real Estate Agent, what are you going to do after you list the home? What's the sale process? Okay, you're going to put it to auction, or you're going to put it to silent auction, or you're going to run a private treaty campaign. But can we get a sense of the specifics of that? Where will it be marketed? How will it be marketed? Who will fund the cost of that? Should we do a video? Should inspections be by appointment? Do we open it up for open house to the entire neighbourhood? You're here tonight pitching for our business, but are you going to be the agent that's on site? There's a lot of agents that write a lot of business if you follow their internet profile, for example, but are rarely on site at the inspections, quite simply because they've got too many listings on the go at any one time. They can't get around to all of them on a Saturday. So the person that sits in front of you and purports to be the person that's going to sell your home is actually not there working with the buyers. Furthermore, give us some confidence that you're connected to active buyers in the marketplace. If the campaign is fully dependent on you advertising our home and connecting with fresh buyers in the marketplace, that doesn't give us the confidence that an agent who's immediately and already connected with active buyers in the marketplace does. So can we get a sense of your buyer management process? They're the sorts of things that you should be drilling down to.
Okay, so we asked important questions about process, and I would assume a good agent can come prepared to answer any of those questions without hesitation. many listing processes that I have seen and even ones that I've done myself, we usually bring a pack. We've got some things that we want our vendors to see. What kinds of things will a good agent have with them? And are there any things that a potential seller should look out for in terms of overly flashy, distracting, elements that are there to make it look really appealing, but not, potentially hide the absence of actual content?
I think be wary of things that are superficial and expensive, and look for contradictions in the agent's pitch. So you might get a flyer through the letterbox saying we've got lots of buyers interested in your area. Would you be interested in a market appraisal if you're thinking of selling? And you ring up and say, well, look, your flyer arrived or your email arrived at the right time because we are thinking of selling, and you said that you're dealing with a number of buyers, and the agent, maybe to even build credibility into that, might mention that they've got 3 underbidders from the auction around the corner, for example. You say, so I'm kind of interested in selling my property. Let's talk about what's involved. And then the agent starts talking to you about a $10,000 advertising campaign. So, sorry, that's a bit of a contradiction. I've called you in because you dropped a flyer in my letterbox or an email, whatever it was, saying that you've got 3 underbidders from a couple of auctions in the neighbourhood, but now you're wanting $10,000 to go and find a buyer. I'm now confused as to what your real message and real purpose is here.
Yeah, interesting. So make sure that their initial marketing aligns with the message that they give you in the living room. Is an important one?
Absolutely, because a lot of these flyers, I hate to say it, are a foot in the door tactic. Let me get in the door and then I'll upsell the client. Get in the door with something that seems plausible. We've got some underbidders interested, and then as soon as they're in the door, start talking about running a fully fledged campaign, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a fully fledged campaign, but it's in contradiction to the message, I've got 3 underbidders from the house around the corner.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't line up and certainly is or should be a bit of a red flag. Some of the other elements, though, we talk about obviously price that it will sell for, but we also have mentioned agent's commission price. Now, I've heard stories of vendors trying to challenge an agent on their commission and finding that, some will just cut the commission price to get the listing. Do you think it's reasonable as a potential seller to challenge your agent on the fee that they're charging? And what would you expect a good agent, how would a good agent respond to a challenge like that in your experience?
You should, great question, Kieran. You should challenge the agent on everything, because the most powerful time for a prospective vendor is before they've signed. Once you've signed, you're beholden to everything in that agency agreement, whether you like it or not. So no matter what the agent says your property's worth, high, low, or about right, you should challenge it on them. And by challenging the agent on the price that they've quoted for the property, they will demonstrate that they have knowledge or lack of. Either way, it'll be insightful for you as the prospective seller interviewing the agents. Conversely, the agent's telling you that I'm the best agent because I'll get you the highest price for your property, and the moment you start prodding them for a lower fee and they start capitulating on price as far as cutting their own fee to get the listing, then as a home seller, you've got every right to be concerned about the agent's ability to hold the line on price. There's an old saying in real estate that if the real estate agent will quickly give their own money away, imagine what they'll do when they get their hands on yours. So at the end of the day, you're employing a realtor not to get you a sale. Anyone can sell your home. You're employing a realtor to get you the best possible price in the marketplace in the least amount of time with the least amount of risk.
So effectively, as agents, we should be viewed more as negotiators than house sellers, I guess, as a category, because our job is to negotiate on behalf of our client for the best possible price and not capitulate in the face of pressure.
That's right. You will get, as a home seller, you will get what you tolerate. And if you allow a real estate agent to come in and say, we deserve your listing because we've got high clearance rates, well, your property will probably sell with that agent because they do have high clearance rates if it is a legitimate claim. But let me just say this, that high clearance rates are good for real estate agents, high prices are good for vendors. So what is it you're chasing? You're chasing the best price in the marketplace, or you're looking to just clear the property? We've seen some auction sales in recent times where the property sold. They sold at or around the reserve, but we know the buyers would have paid more.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, would it be reasonable as a potential seller to apply the pub test to an agent? Get a sense of would I actually enjoy sitting down, having a cup of coffee or a beer with this person and enjoy their company enough to trust them to advocate on my behalf for our asset?
No, not the pub test. I wouldn't say that you should like someone on that basis. The basis, if you're looking for gut feel, intuition feel, because you don't feel like you are able to go through all the nuances of employing a real estate agent, the trust decision that you should be doing with a real estate agent is when I'm not in the room and the person sitting in my home tonight is negotiating with a buyer, do I trust them both from an integrity perspective and a competence perspective to do the right thing by us? Because everyone's going to tell you what you want to hear to your face, but what are they going to do? How are they going to act when we're not around? Now, we've all gone into an open house incognito and asked the agent a few probing questions, and before you know it, the people are getting divorced, they're under financial pressure, they've bought elsewhere, whatever it is that is causing that respective property to be on the market, and some novice agent just blurts it all out. That is what you need to know before you sign with any agent. Can they hold the line?
So before we wrap up then, are there any specific questions, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but is there any kind of question specifically other than commission you could ask someone to judge whether or not they are of good enough or strong enough character to hold the line on some of these tougher conversations? Yeah,
look, I think when a real estate agent says to you, look, I'm valuing your house at 2 to 2.2 million, when a home buyer says, look, the market is under pressure, the auction clearance rate on the weekend was 50%, meaning half the properties that went to auction failed to sell, and the other properties that did sell as being considered successful auction campaign, more than half of those sold prior to auction, meaning there wasn't enough bidders. So whilst I see that you've got a guide on the home of 2 million, the property around the corner on the market sold for 1.9 last week. So I think this is overpriced. Mr. Real Estate Agent, how would you handle that with a buyer who says that the home's overpriced at a guide of 2 million when you're here tonight saying 2.2? See how they answer it.
Yeah, really good point. Great topic, Peter. I think it's a really valuable one for any potential sellers. I know we all in the industry think about price, fee. That's a common discussion. And I know plenty of agents that have asked potential home sellers, well, what do you think it's worth, or how much do you need to sell? But at the end of the day, you're right. There are processes and there is performance of the individual agent to maximise the outcome for a seller, and we need to make sure that anyone out there is doing the best they can to protect their own asset, because they only sell it once, right?
That's right, indeed. You only get one chance to sell it.
Certainly. So moving on, another big day for us in real estate, obviously with the RBA meeting today. There's not much to intro here, Pete. It's what's the statement from the RBA today, and how is it going to impact us in property?
What I thought was good, or not good, but interesting, before the RBA's announcement at 2:30, coming through the press, we had ANZ CEO Shane Elliott said that expectations of interest rate cuts this year are optimistic. That was backed up by Warren Hogan, who we've discussed in the past, where he's warned that the next interest rate change could be an increase. Now, if we go to the RBA statement, I think it's the third last line there. Yes, it is. The path of interest rates from here that will best ensure that inflation returns to target in a reasonable time frame remains uncertain, and the RBA board is not ruling anything in or out.
That's some interesting language, particularly I'm sure it was ANZ were one of the major banks who predicted a September cut, and in fact may have been the first to come out and suggest that was on the cards originally. That's an interesting shift in position, I think.
Yeah, the article, I think it was on news.com, this one, Kieran, says Shane Elliott is in disagreement with his own bank's economists over whether the RBA of Australia will begin to cut interest rates this year. So if you're sitting at home and you can't quite agree internally whether rates will go up or down from here, rest assured at the upper echelons of one of Australia's top 4 banks, they can't agree on what happens from here either. The RBA are firmly keeping all options open to them. It's data dependent. Again, there's that line that they used in today's statement. So they're going to judge it based on what inflation does. As we discussed last week, it pushed up a little bit in the US in last week's announcement for them. So the inflation battle's certainly not won.
So other than the third last line, which mentions that they can't rule in or out any future changes, what's your general sense on the overall message itself? So I know other times we've talked about the statements, you can get a general feel of what they're trying to portray, even though they often talk between the lines. What do you think the general message in this one? Is it a slightly optimistic tone? Is it neutral, or is it a little bit pessimistic?
When I read it, I thought it was a really interesting but boring, by the same token, statement. They used the word moderate or a version of moderate, moderating, moderates. They used that, I think, 10 times in the statement in different context. So I think from here what you're seeing is the RBA believe that it's slowly cooling and that the settings they've got interest rates at are slowly moderating the inflation in the economy, but it's not certain that it's going to continue that way, so they are keeping all options available. I saw some well-known economists that felt that the RBA could cut rates at their May 7 meeting, keeping in mind that they're every 6 weeks now, these RBA meetings, not every month. I don't see anything in this statement today to suggest that the RBA are lining up to cut rates in 6 weeks in May unless there's a massive change in the numbers. This tells me that they're going to be really, really cautious about cutting too early. The other thing that's not being mentioned in the commentary across the board is that of the advanced economies, Australia has one of the lowest cash rates of all advanced economies. So it would be a massive move for the RBA to be the first central bank to cut rates. I don't know why that point's not being made more broadly and louder, but that for mine is a really big one. That the Australian dollar would have a severe correction if we were to cut rates first.
I wonder if the language around the cash rate is quite deliberate. I mean, it would be potentially tone deaf to suggest that, we're actually in a very low cash setting and it's not that hard compared to other advanced economies, while everyone out there that I know and certainly many other people know are doing it pretty tough right now.
Oh, that's right. Households are doing it tough and the RBA know that, but they equally know that if they don't win the inflation battle, it's going to be even tougher to get this under control later.
Interesting to hear that some economists are predicting a rate cut that early. I certainly don't get that sense, despite it's something that I myself and many others are wishing for. What do you think, if anything, will come of this in terms of relationship to property? Do you think there's enough strength in the language for any reaction in the market, or do you think it'll just be business as usual for now?
In our March newsletter, we spoke about the two-speed property market that's opened up. I think that gap's going to get wider where the mortgage belt, as they call it, will be continued to be punished by these interest rate settings, and those that are operating largely in cash with low debt will continue to buy and sell upper-end real estate as though there was, basically impervious to where the interest rate setting of the day is. The upper ends of the market will only be impacted if the economy derails. So in terms of the economy derailing, you'd probably have to say the immediate risk being bowled at the middle stump is the iron ore price. That's come down very sharply. If that continues to fall, that'll have an impact on the government and will flow through to the economy, you would think.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis. I know I said last week that a rate hold's effectively the same as an interest rate rise at this point for a lot of people. Interestingly, today there was an article.
Because it's the terminal rate, where the rate that it's at is bringing economic activity down in and of its own. So you're absolutely right. We're clearly at the terminal rate because it's moderating without moving.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we talked about the terminal rate last year and how it's incredibly hard to predict when you hit it, particularly for central banks, and they don't know until they've effectively gone past it or reverted from it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, today or yesterday, there was an article released talking about how in the last, to be honest, I can't remember the time course, but a recent period, a third of all property sales were cash only.
Yes, I saw this.
And on the East Coast, I think it was from today maybe, and on the East Coast of Australia, half of the transactions were done in cash.
Yes.
That's just unbelievable for me, again, in a period where it feels like no one has any cash.
There's certainly a lot of people out there in cash. Baby boomers downsizing are a big contributor to that, selling the family home and then buying another property for maybe half the value, for example. Half goes into their super or becomes their super, because let's face it, there are a lot of people who don't have as much super as they would like, their super's effectively in their family home, and they're unlocking their super as they sell it. So it makes a lot of sense. PEXA is the electronic exchange settlement that came into being about 5-6 years ago now, and there's some great data like that coming out about the number of properties that transact without a mortgage involved, and that's illuminating to get a sense of why there is such little distress in the property market at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly eye-opening for me. I mean, I don't think many people would have expected that that was the case, that so many people could just buy a house without a mortgage. It's inconceivable.
If you are downsizing, though, you wouldn't want, and you're at retirement or you're in retirement, you certainly wouldn't want to be buying another property with a mortgage. I know reverse mortgages are out there, and they play a vital role for some people as well. But it does make sense, given that baby boomers, whatever they do in unison, they create a boom, and they've had a very good run economically over quite a few decades, and now they're selling down. So I think demographically it does make sense that there's so much cash transactions coming from that side of the economy.
I don't disagree. I think it is very logical. Like when you break it down, it does make sense that, everyone I know of that age group is certainly may have worked in a period where there wasn't forced superannuation, so they have had to make alternate arrangements, particularly through self-managed funds now. Do you think the social kind of viewpoint or language around these cash purchases, though, is skewed because of the immigration situation at the moment? I know my first thought was I saw an article about cash buyers, my immediate thought was got to be foreign money. I didn't even think of the logical, well, of course, it's baby boomers downsizing. I just went, immigration's through the roof. It must be foreign buyers.
No, I think where the immigration is playing a role is that the government understandably have pursued skilled migration, yeah?
Of course.
So if you're in the UK, Asia, America, and you are invited to make your way to Australia as a skilled migrant, you're coming here with money. Now, when you come here, as I've just mentioned earlier, Australia has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, cash rate of the primary developed economies in the world. So our currency, therefore, is very low from a historical basis at the moment. So if you're one of the many, many tens of thousands of skilled migrants coming into this country, moving here and saying, look at this is wonderland here in Australia, and you're coming in with a strong currency relative to the Australian dollar, you're off to the races.
Yeah, absolutely. Given the announcement today, as we move into our market wrap for the week, firstly, what has the week look like? I love that we've been running these weekly to get a real sense of what the trend lines are in property at the moment. We're always touching on clearance rate and the number of properties out there. What has the market been like this week? And then what are your predictions for the week ahead, given another RBA week usually has some impact, whether bad or good?
The RBA tried to make no major statement in today's statement, so I don't think that'll have much.
They made a moderated argument.
That's right, yeah, that and some, rest assured. So I don't think the RBA statement will play much of a role, to be frank, going forward. They're clearly just on the sidelines watching intently to see how it all plays through. In the week ahead, if you're looking for a big play, in any given week last year, the auction numbers for the week was about 800 to 900. As we've discussed relentlessly on this podcast this year, auction numbers have hovered between 12 and 1,300 auctions per week, which is well up on the norms from last year. Because Saturday week is Easter Saturday and you're not going to, by rights, run an auction on Easter Saturday, there's a whopping 1,600 properties going to auction this week. So that's double the norm of what we were seeing last year on any given auction weekend. That'll be fascinating to see what the auction clearance rate, not the manufactured auction clearance rate on a Saturday night, but next Tuesday, not sure what day March next Tuesday is, must be the 26th, is it? Tuesday, March 26th.
Yes. Yeah.
When SQM Research release those numbers, it'll be interesting to see what percentage of the 1,600 have sold.
Yeah, that's a huge number, 1,600. And it, my immediate instinct is to think there is no way the 1,600 can sell under the hammer on what is effectively a Super Saturday.
Well, as we know, for the last 5 weeks, the volumes have been elevated, Kieran, and the auction clearance rate has slowly been drifting from 60% to mid-50s to 52, 53. And then on today's numbers, released by SQM Research, the auction clearance rate for last week in Sydney was 50.3%. So Louis Christopher's calling that an evenly balanced with market, with an absolute surge in supply coming this Saturday. So I reckon the market's done really, really well to absorb the stock at the rate that it has, particularly after a sluggish start to the year. But yes, there's clearly a rush, as we touched on last week. There's clearly been a rush from vendors to get their property to the auction market before April. April has its own set of challenge with the Anzac Day long weekend, Easter at the start of the month, and then school holidays in the middle.
Yeah, look, really good recap, Peter. Certainly a weekend to look out for. I want to thank you for taking the time today. Some really good topics, and we certainly covered off on a lot. I look forward to talking with you next week.
Likewise. Thanks, Kieran.
And thanks to everyone for listening. Current Market Insights. We look forward to talking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.